And what I have to do now, what's left, is specific like Ba'imis, in certain episodes that are so specific like Ba'imis. I just want to repeat something because it's so important to me. The highlight of the parade, girls, and there was a lot of stuff going on. There were floats. I was a kid, there were clowns. I mean, to me, the greatest thing in the world was a clown. If I got a picture with a clown, the clown came next to me and he blew his, my nose, oh, that was it, my day was made. There were clowns. And there were all kinds of, whatever they did, there was a parade. And they had their marching bands, and then they used to bring from the U.S. Army. They used to come from the U.S. Army with trucks and salutes, and it was a whole thing. They would shoot into the air in front of the Rebbe to honor the Rebbe. It was a lot of nice things. It was the children, girls. The Rebbe came out, and I described it to you. Rabbi Hecht would formally introduce the Rebbe. It's the only time that it would happen. Every time he would read a text, a prepared text, he would introduce the Rebbe. And you should really listen to that text. It's very interesting. And then would walk out to the tune of Ani Maamin, which was dramatic. It was special. They would walk out of the front door up to the platform, and there was always a policeman standing by the door. The Rebbe would acknowledge him with a salute, and the Rebbe walked quickly to his place. And then, so way back when the Rebbe would say, Yankov would cheer. He would tell us to clap, because it was all of Paltiel. It's America. To clap when the Rebbe comes out it's a little funny, you know. Cheering that Rebbe is you cheer a president, you cheer a politician, you cheer a here today, gone tomorrow, a Rebbe. But the Yankov would stand and clap. They would have to clap because it was on television. Whatever it was, they should hasten. They were all giving him a lot of derech eretz. The Rebbe would come up onto the stage. Within a minute or two, the Rebbe started to speak. Then, of course, later on there was the Rebbe's Pesukim on ChaZaL, which I'm going to get to soon, Mr. Shem. And then the Rebbe spoke. In the early years, the talks were quite short. In the later years, the talks were longer. Before I could remember, you could see from the Hanochas, the Rebbe spoke 5 minutes. And maybe did another 5 minutes, and Rabbi Hecht would translate. In Shpeta de Kiyad, the Rebbe could talk an hour, and then Rabbi Hecht would translate. And in another hour, Rabbi Hecht would translate. It became very long. The Rebbe had to say what he had to say, and even though the kids were never sitting over there Spielkis, the Rebbe got to do what the Rebbe's got to do, as they just said it. And then the children would march. Please stop eating in class. The children would march. So Yankov stood over there like a nervous wreck, announcing who's going by. So they had to choreograph it. There was a whole seder who was going first, who was going second, and many times there were mishaps. But it was supposed to go in an order. This group of kids went, then a float, then another group of kids, then a marching band, then a float, then some more kids. And Rabbi Hecht is reading from a paper. So if the people on the ground made a mistake and they say that Rabbi Hecht was introducing to the Rebbe the wrong children or the wrong float or the wrong marching band, and it happened more than once or twice. And he was very nervous because every second by the Rebbe is precious. And the Rebbe standing up there on that stage, he looked at the floats. He enjoyed the floats, but he looked at the children. The parade was the kids. I'm thinking now as I'm talking to you, in the later years they made an upshedding float. A lot of boys have the upshedding like Be'emet, because if you're born after the Erev Pesach, you can't cut your hair like Be'emet. So all the boys and their fathers, whose upshedding was between Tezvav Nissen and Chayir, were on this truck. It was an upshedding float. The first time was a father who had a 3-year-old son who paid for it, then it became a seder. And as they would walk by the Rebbe would do this with his hands. He would symbolically cut their hair as they were passing. It was the kind of day it was. It was a day of extraordinary chiruv. And the Rebbe would look at the children. The Rebbe would look at the children. And the way the Rebbe looked at kids, B'chlal, the Rebbe looked at people. I think about it in hindsight. I was a little kid. I'm not a little kid anymore. Right? My whole generation were little kids. My whole generation now are the Rebbe Shluchim. But when we were little kids, the Rebbe didn't treat us like little kids. He treated us like future Shluchim, and that's why he looked at us. He looked at children as what they could be, not at little kids that he did a play with. He had such a respect for little people. It was really real. And the way the Rebbe looked at the children, the hope and the pride and the positiveness, the Rebbe had so much belief in people. You know, many people have said this, the greatest gift that Rebbe gave us was his Belief in us. Wie viel der Rebbe verstanden? The Rebbe felt each person could be 1,000 times what they were. He really believed it. He wasn't bluffing, he wasn't exaggerating. The Rebbe looked at each person and said, Echad Yil Elef. The Rebbe said, it's Pasuk. 1 becomes 1,000. Come on. But that's how the Rebbe looked at people. Shnayim, 2 is already 10,000. When you look at those, the way the Rebbe looks at the children, it's full of love, but it's also full of that unbelievably hopeful and positive energy about what each child will be. And then, of course, there's the cute things. Rebbe used to wave to the children with one hand, with 2 hands. If the children waved to the Rebbe would wave back as they waved. The kids waved like this, the Rebbe waved like this. If the children waved like this, they waved like this. But then there's this, I can't get over that. The Rebbe's blowing kisses to little kids. It's when you see it, it's like, it seems so natural. But the Rebbe is blowing kisses to the kinderlach. He's blowing kisses. What I say, it's so... It's a Rebbe, so it's as sweet as it is and as beautiful as it is, it's also very holy. You know, I mean, you all heard the story with Yaik and Kalhecht, I remember it. The Rebbe blew him a kiss in Chasteda. The year he passed away. There's a story with a dream, but the kiss I remember. He came into Akofis late, Rabbi J.J. Hecht. Tavshin Nun, 1990. He came over, he was quite shikir, if I remember correctly. And he was coming from the back to the front. And he saw the Rebbe. And I think he blew a kiss for it. The Rebbe blew him a kiss to J.J. Hecht. The Rebbe blew him a kiss. J.J. Hecht was not a little boy. He was big, not just because he was physically big, he was an Adam Gadol. That was the year he passed. You know, but okay, but the Rebbe blew him a kiss. I remember at the Hakofis, you didn't see that often by Hakofis, but by the Lag BaEma parade, they would blow kisses to the children. And to me, one of the things that's hard to forget, but you want to remember it, is in the later years, the Rebbe was physically elderly. His goof was not as strong as it had been. I'll give you another, again, I'm repeating what I said, and I want to repeat it. I'm all gezeigt, the Rebbe gestanden, the Rebbe stood straight. The Rebbe stood straight. Till Lnedvot. Till 1976, the Rebbe saying straight up. In Tov Shin Men, the Rebbe started leading at the Shtender. He was 78 years old, mind you. How many 78-year-olds? Stood straight, like a king. It's beautiful, those pictures of the Rebbe, Bechlal, the Rebbe stood straight in his place. He didn't lean on the Shtender until mamish the later years. And by the parade, he stood straight up, mamish, straight. Until Tavshin Mem. Tavshin Mem, the Rebbe allowed himself to lean on the Shtender, to make it a little easier for himself. And he's waving to the children. The Rebbe would literally, in the last couple of parades, you can see it in the video, he's using his left hand to hold up his right hand so he can continue waving.
Oh yeah.
3 hours of kids, and he's waving. The goof got that gvul.
3 hours he was marching? 3 hours.
There was so many kids, yeah. Biggest parades at 10,000 kids, 20,000 kids. Each one marched by the Rebbe. It took a long time. It took a lot of time. And then, by the way, the Rebbe went to the mikveh and went to the oil, which meant he was fasting that day also, a broch. And sometimes they came back after the oil and made a fabringen, in case he hadn't worked hard enough that day.
From what age did they march?
Till bar mitzvah.
No,
As long as you can get into the carriages used to roll by the Rebbe. Babies, yeah, the mothers came with little babies. Till bar mitzvah, until bas mitzvah, you marched by the Rebbe. It was very special, the parade. Now, I said to you that I want to talk about particular parades.
Can you talk about 1980?
I'm going to try. I'm going to get to as many as I can. I don't know what you know that I'm supposed to say. Maybe I'm going to say the wrong thing. But I'm going to tell you what I understand. The last class I gave, I talked about Tavshin Chav Zayin, the year of the 6-Day War, which is the chitas of this week. The Rebbe quoted Pesukim, but the Rebbe spoke. There's a video and an audio of that talk. The Rebbe spoke at the end of the parade. The last talk about the situation in Eretz Yisrael. It's so full of godliness. My teacher, one of my Rosh Yeshiva, said to me, as soon as the Rebbe opened his mouth, we knew this was different. There was a different kind of talk altogether. And the Rebbe predicted there'd be Nisim and Eflois, and there were unbelievable Nisim and Eflois in the 6-Day War. Tavshin Lamed was a parade. 1970. I was 4.5. This is gossip. This is mamish being a yente, but I can't help it. I'm a yente. Lubavitch was growing, and the Rebbe's notoriety, the Rebbe's fame was growing. So it was an opportunity. The Rebbe's coming out to see the children, so they invited dignitaries. That means politicians. The mayor, the comptroller, I don't know, all these guys with all their different names. Everybody's got a job and a name, but they're all very important in their own minds. And in the parade of Tavshin Lamed, the Rebbe is standing up there on the stage, and I have a whole bunch of pictures. I have a mamish collection. I probably have 50 pictures of that parade, maybe more. And the children are going by, and these men walk up to the Rebbe, they start to talk. And the kids are walking by, and these men are talking to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is listening to them with one ear, looking at the kids with the other ear. And it happened over and over again. It happened many times, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. The Rebbe was partially interrupted. And the Rebbe is a gentleman. So these very important people, they're invited to the parade. Why should they come to the parade? They're not going to have a moment with the Rebbe. Because they said the picture in the paper that everyone should see that they talked to the Rebbe of the parade. And the Rebbe was very unhappy. The Rebbe was really, really unhappy. And he let the people in charge. I mean, Rabbi Hecht, the Rebbe loved him like us. The Rebbe told him, he told the Rebbe, I'm not a chassid, I'm a child. And the Rebbe acknowledged that. But when the Rebbe wasn't happy, he knew. And the Rebbe was really not happy. The Rebbe was really not happy because he said, this is the day of Reb Shem Bar Yochai. What's he talking politics with these Nadasha people with their Nadasha interests? Anyway, Lamed Gimel, 1973, which is the first parade that I remember. I was 7 years old. I thought it was 100. Man, I was a little bitch. I was 7. And I remember that parade like I was a big machar. I remember marching in the parade. The Rebbe didn't come out. Lamed Gimel didn't come to the parade. It was raining, it was overcast. The whole experience was very yichi. Like I told you, I remember 2 things. My friend said to me, as we were walking to 770 from Olateda, the next Lag BaOmer is in 7 years. I told this to you, so I said to him, Lag BaOmer happens every year. No, Lag BaOmer is in 7 years. What he meant, the next Lag BaOmer on a Sunday is in 7 years. So I calculated that the next Lag BaOmer is going to be after my Bar Mitzvah, and I was disappointed.
You feel the march once.
But then Lamed Vav, wait, I'll get to that in a minute. They made a parade on the Tuesday, like it's this year a Tuesday, with a big Yossi and a Klal. And the other thing I remember is people standing on a stage and screaming. I had no idea what they were saying. People screaming. And we walked to 770, we walked by, went up park. The whole day was yichi. It was very, very unpleasant. Now, why didn't the Rebbe come to that parade? I'm not going to tell you all the details because some of them are rather painful. And I knew the details because we experienced them in yeshiva as little kids. I believe, and somebody once told this to me, that part of the reason the Rebbe didn't come out is because there was a protest from what happened 3 years earlier. The Rebbe was afraid that he's going to come out and there's going to be a bunch of politicians and yotzmachs and perkones who want to talk to him and get the pictures in the paper. This is the kids and the Rebbe and that's it. And the Rebbe didn't want any help, didn't anybody else to be there. And I've heard that that was part of the reason. Although that's not the reason that's more famous. The reason that's more famous was there was a machlokes in Khan between individual people. They happened to be very important people. And there was a physical fight. And the Rebbe was very upset. And the Rebbe said they have to make shalom. They have to not just stop fighting, they have to make peace. They have to figure out how to live together peacefully. And the Rebbe took it very personally. And the Rebbe Kvayochel was unable to bring shalom between these individuals. And the Rebbe said, quote, Ich bin nicht zoiche, sich zu mishtater sein in die Lule der Rabbi. I don't have the schus to participate in the yahrzeit of Reb Shem Bar Yochai. That's how the Rebbe phrased it. He felt so personal about this machlokes that he said, I don't have the schus to participate in the Yom Tov of Rashbi, and he didn't come to the parade. It was very disappointing. Very disappointing. And again, I was only 7, so I don't remember, but I've heard and I've read that till the last minute they were begging the Rebbe, maybe the Rebbe would come out. And the Rebbe made it very clear he wants to come out, he wishes to come out. He said, the bottom line is that was a parade on a Sunday. And I'm assuming there were a considerable number of public school children, which is why the parade was made altogether. They didn't make it for the public school children. But the Rebbe didn't come out. It was a very big disappointment. And that would have been the only Lag BaOmer parade that I would remember as a child. Now, I'm assuming that my father and my mother took me to the parade in Chavov when I was 1.5 years, and Chavzayim when I was 2.5, and Lamed when I was 4.5. I probably was at those parades, but I don't have such a good memory. You know, I tell stories about my childhood enough times, I start believing that I remember them. But this, I haven't told enough times. The only parade as a child I would have known was that parade in the rain when the Rebbe didn't come out. But the Rebbe did us a huge favor. In 1976, I was 10 years old, the Rebbe made a parade on a Tuesday. It wasn't Sunday. Like this year it's a Tuesday, which meant that the parade was for us, for the Lubavitcher kids. Now, could they bring public school children? I'm sure they could. But they had to play hooky. They had to miss school. And they were not going to get permission from the public schools to miss school. If it was on a Wednesday, Mela, they have mitvach shah. But Tuesday, did they bring public school children? They probably did. But those kids had to miss a day of school, and whatever. The parents had to get permission, the school had to get permission. But it was for us. It was a very, very special occasion, and I remember that parade well. I was a big boy. And that's when the Rebbe made the Yud Beis Pesuk, 1976, Tov Shin Lamed Vav. It was the bicentennial. In a couple more years, we're going to have the 250 years from America. That year was the 200th anniversary of America. Mitzvah gekocht in the bicentennial. 200. Now it's 2023, 2026. It's going to be 250 years, and everyone's going to celebrate America. If they still like America, I don't know how America feels about itself. When I was a kid, the bicentennial was a big deal. They made a special dollar and a special coin. But the Rebbe came out to the parade. That was when the Rebbe made the 12 Pesukim Umemari ChaZaL. And we wanted us to memorize it. The first 6 he made, the Rebbe made a Fabringen, I think, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, 2 weeks before. And the Rebbe spoke about the first 6. And the Rebbe said 2 Pesukim from Chumash, 2 Pesukim from ChaZaL, 2 Umemari ChaZaL, and 2 from Tanya. So the 2 Pesukim were Teira Tziva and Shema Yisrael. The 2 Umemari ChaZaL were Kol Yisrael and B'chol Deir, and the 2 from Tanya were Kikal V'Elecha and V'Hin Hashem Nitzav Alof. 2 weeks later on Lag BaOmer, and I'm not sure if it was the night before or the night after. I'm assuming it was the night before, but I'm not sure. They made again a Fabringen, and he introduced the next 6. Again, 2, 2, and 2. So then it was Bereshis and Vishinanto, and it was Yagaiti V'Loi Matasi Al Tamin, and V'Havlech Chamoicha, and then of course Yismach and V'Zeh Kol Adam. So this is how the 12 Pesukim Umemari ChaZaL were introduced. So by that parade, they put up. You see, it's it's hard to imagine how ugly 7-7 they used to be. It's still quite ugly, but it was uglier. There used to be a fire escape on the front of the building. On the front face of the room was a fire escape. So they hung on each row of fire escape one of the 12 Pesukim. You get it? That's how it was. Now the fire escapes have been removed. I don't know if it's legal or not legal, but there's no fire escapes at the front of 770, so they actually paste them onto the wall. They finally figured they made this massive, big signs, one piece of cloth that's, I don't know, 40, 50 feet across, and in the middle you have, they call it the big parade, and then on one side you have 6.
Pieces.
Oh, okay, and then the other side, it's plenty big as it is. But this was the base Pesukim. The Rebbe came out and he made a parade for us. That year, Tov Shin Lamed Vav, when I was 10, was called Shnas HaChinuch, the year of our education, and the Rebbe was pounding away Chinuch. And I suppose the biggest thing that could have been done in that year to honor the Rebbe's desire for Chinuch was to take a child out of a public school and put him into a Jewish school. The Rebbe spent so much time talking about that. The goal of Gan Yisrael, the goal of the release time, the goal of all of these programs was to get one kid to go to a yeshiva. Not all about yeshiva, it could be a modern Orthodox school, but go to a school where he's going to learn about the Eivish and about Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu and Shabbos and Kosher and so on and so forth. And it was like the highest purpose of the Rebbe was that a Yiddish kid who's learning in a public school should go into a kosher school. And that year was a Shturendike Shtas HaChinuch. And the Rebbe did many things, even that were for us, for the Lubavitcher boys. The Rebbe wanted us to have pen pals with boys in Israel. It didn't work. We sat in class and wrote letters. I never got a letter back, so that was the end of that. But we wrote. It was in my English class, so I must have written in English. It was the first time in my life I studied English. I was 10 and a half years old. I was learning how to ABC. So exactly, maybe the guy couldn't read my letter, not because he didn't read English, because I couldn't write in English. But we wrote letters. They made us write letters. The Rebbe wanted that we should make a connection between American children and Israeli children. There were a lot of different things that year that the Rebbe did for Chinuch. But the biggest thing, without a question, schools started for public school kids to get an education that year. It was a big deal. And one of the highlights of that year was this special parade. There was a stark gekocht. You have to understand that was a period in the mid-70s when there were thousands of Russians. Hundreds of thousands of Russians came from Russia. Now, the Russians who came from Russia, Reuben Kuhlman Afrum, the Rebbe felt that every Russian is his brother. The Rebbe is Russian. I saw a Sikh on the Rebbe recently where the Rebbe said that he wanted, when the Russians came from Russia, instead of living in Brighton Beach, they should live in Crown Heights. There's plenty of apartments. Let them move into Crown Heights. We'll have Jews in the neighborhood, and that'll be better for us. And they'll be around other Yidden. Even if they go to public school, it'll be better off. And the Rebbe was very disappointed. Nobody did anything. There was the 70s was a period when many Russians. I think there was a 50,000 Russian quota per year. Several 100,000 Russians, maybe even more, were allowed to leave Russia, and a good percentage of them settled in New York. And Free Friends of Refugees for Eastern Europe was a very, very important organization. They never had any money, but they did incredible work. They had camp, they had a school. And a lot of these efforts, the Shnas HaChinuch, on a practical level, was to take a Russian kid whose parents just came from Russia, and Americans free education, go to public school, free education. And tragically, a lot of the parents were saying, what am I going to say next? The free lunch. Poor people sent their kids to public school because the kids would have the best meal in the public schools. Terev Chazer, Mamish Terev Chazer was a hot lunch. They served them meat. And a lot of kids who went to public school had a better meal in public school than their parents could give them for breakfast, or their parents could give them for supper because the parents couldn't afford Pashat. And it was a time, and the Rebbe was obsessed with chinuch and taking a child out of public school, putting in public school. Bichlal, the Rebbe ate himself up, and he continues to eat himself up about Jewish children who are going to a school where they learn all kinds of things. And shame, huh? Sure. Of course, they had no money. They had a school, they had teachers. Mesiras Nefesh. The Mesiras Nefesh was unbelievable. Unbelievable. The Mesiras Nefesh of the people who worked in Free was incredible. And they were dedicated to business of. They were Bali Mesiras, they were Chassidish Yidden who taught in these schools. I don't know how they were paid, but they worked and they taught kids. And there are a lot of people, I mean, not nearly as many as could have been, but there are a lot of people today who are frum because they went to a free school as children, and they went into public high school, but something stayed, you know what I'm saying? So that was Lamed Vav, and that's the parade that I remember. In my childhood, Tavshin Lamed Vav was a big deal. It was a big deal. Now the next parade, I was Bar Mitzvah, Tavshin Mem, 1980. Not was Bar Mitzvah, I wasn't even in New York, I was already out of town, I was learning in Yeshiva. I left home in the summer of Lamed Tes, and I was not here, I was in California. I remember the parade in California. Tavshin Mem was a big deal. It was a big deal because for the first time, the Rebbe asked that they should make parades everywhere. Parades were made in New York. Parades were a New York thing. So all the shluchim who lived in any way close to New York, in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, if you were within a 2 or 3 hour drive, even a 4 hour drive, Rhode Island, you took all your kids, you put them on a bus, and you brought them because they marched by the Rebbe. What could be better than that? And the Rebbe asked to make parades everywhere. I was a boy. I was 14 years old. They made a parade in LA. I remember the parade. It was a beautiful parade. It was very exciting. It was a lot of fun. But the Rebbe wanted parades all over the world. And it was the first time the Rebbe asked for parades all over the world, and it was done. And one of the, I'm going to say gossip now, Lashon Hara, so if you're sensitive, don't listen because I don't want to pervert you. One of the things that happened at that time was that a certain Jew who lived to argue with the Rebbe came out publicly against the parades. So the Geder Rebbe, Reb Simcha Bunim, made an announcement that every Geder child, every place in the world is going to the parade, not just Eretz Yisrael. You know how many Geder children there are? Tens of thousands. To this parade of Crown Heights, by the Rebbe, there were over 5,000 Geder children. In Eretz Yisrael, the Geder Rebbe said the Geder kids are going to parade. And if the Geder Rebbe sent the children, the Vision Rebbe sent his kids. So the parade that year was packed. Not just with Lubavitcher children, not just with public school children, but these various citizens who stood up for the covenant of the Rebbe, because people who don't have seichel opposed it, and they made it very personal. They said it's Betel Teire and all the other Narishkeiten. So that year, Tavshin Mem, you want to talk about 1980, that was what happened that year. Number one, the parade became international. Number two, Baruch Hashem, we have enemies, and they are. I can't hear you. Tavshin Mem, and he came out against it. So the Geder Rebbe said every Geder child is going to the parade, and they went from the whole world. And if the Geder children went, the Vision children went from Eretz Yisrael, the Vision. So it was a kid. It was big covered for the Rebbe. Now, of course, you don't have about that parade. It was very hot. And the Rebbe spoke a long sikha, I don't know, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Yankel Hecht is standing there. You ever see the videos? And he's writing vigorously as the Rebbe is talking. He used to write in shorthand every word that the Rebbe said. I don't know how he kept up. And then when the Rebbe finished, he had to translate it. And had to translate it the way the children don't understand it and not fall asleep. Then the Rebbe took another thing again, 35, 40 minutes. And Yankel Hecht is vigorously writing. And it was not fun to be the Rebbe's translator like that. It was a big schus, but it wasn't an easy job. And then, Yankel Hecht actually says, Kinderlach, the Rebbe is like a daddy to us. The Rebbe knows how hot it is. He's not going to make us sit in the sun for one more minute. And then the Rebbe starts speaking in Russian for 45 minutes. Right after Rabbi Hecht announced that the Rebbe is a daddy, and he knows how hot it was, boiling hot. They were giving the kids children, they pushed in the drinks, It was packed. Again, I wasn't there, but it was packed. It was thousands of children. Maybe tens of thousands of children. It's not even a guzman. This was the fact. The Rebbe spoke Tosh Matzah. Now, girls, you must understand. So the good news was that Yankel Hecht didn't translate it. So at least that 45 minutes we saved. And when he finished, Yankel Hecht made a kind of joke, and he said, we watched it on the hookup. That I don't know Russian. Moshe Chaim Levin tried to give him a few words, but the Rebbe spoke for a long time in Russian. Now, girls, there's something you guys need to understand about the Rebbe. And this is another subject, but because it happened, Lag BaOmer, I'm going to talk to it. The Rebbe was deeply, deeply, deeply involved with Yid in Russia. Far beyond anybody's knowledge. He was deeply involved. The Rebbe knew personally hundreds and thousands of Yid in Russia, all over the entire Union. The Israeli secret police know it. You know, until 1967, there was an embassy in Moscow. And these very, very freie Israelis would all say Peh Maleh, the only person who thought about the Jews and was able to help them, was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They didn't know how the Rebbe had his connections. The Rebbe was connected to thousands of people, individual, on a personal basis, all over Russia. He was very involved in Russia, but he was incredibly careful about secrecy. The Rebbe, he knew the KGB better than anybody because he tasted the KGB. The Rebbe said, when I was a child, they would call me for questioning. I was the oldest son of the Rav. I knew exactly what the Russia was. And the Rebbe was always screaming, be quiet, be careful. There's so many stories. People went to Russia and they didn't appreciate it, and they would go and they would meet people and they would hang around. And the Rebbe would say to them, do you know that you went to this person's house on a Friday night and you ate a dinner? You put that person's life in danger. The Rebbe was so careful about Russia. Even when I went to Russia, which was the late 80s, we were given a special one from Maskidis. You should know Russia is still Russia, and the KGB is still the KGB. Behave! Don't act like as if you're a Lubavitcher in America with all the Americana chutzpah with the bravado and the, I don't care. It's behave. One of my friends took a picture of the Shpalerke, and they arrested him, Kipshutai, in 1988. And I heard that when the Rebbe heard that he was arrested, the Rebbe screamed, the Rebbe was very sensitive, and everything was top secret. The Rebbe was very, very sensitive to the situation in Russia. And every word he said was so measured. I mean, it's known now that the Russians had spies in 770 for years. There was a guy who came to every Fabrik, and everybody knew who he was. And the Rebbe, a guy, he would show up, every Fabrik, and he stood and listened to every word that Rebbe had to say, and he knew Yiddish. And the Rebbe was so careful. The Rebbe was so careful. For the Rebbe to publicly speak in Russian, on the street, not in the building. And what he said, it was very measured. It was very oisgerechnet. It wasn't impulsive. The Rebbe decided that now was the moment. And it was really, really, really pushing the envelope. In other words, when the Rebbe said it, it seemed very risque. It seemed very, very not in character. But when you saw what happened over the next decade, that the Soviet Union began to fall to pieces, I'm sure that Beruchnius the Sikh was a huge push, but the Rebbe saw what was happening, and the Rebbe felt that now he can say this. A year before he couldn't say it, now he can say it. What did he say? And that Sikh. He said the same thing the Friedrich Rebbe used to say in the Sikhs when he lived in Russia. Now girls, you don't know that because no one ever taught this to you. The Rebbe didn't say don't listen to the government. The Rebbe didn't say that you have to defy the government and unpfeifen and teach kids Kedar. The Rebbe said according to the Russian law, you're allowed to teach your children Yiddishkeit. Not only are you allowed to teach your own children, you're allowed to gather your neighbor's children. There were limits, 3 children, 4 children. You were allowed to teach children Yiddishkeit. And it was completely within the parameters of the Soviet Union's law to teach Torah in a limited way and to provide freedom of religion. You're supposed to go to shul, you're supposed to keep kosher, you're supposed to keep Shabbos. And that was Rebbe's pitch. He was speaking really to the Russian government more than to anybody else. And he was saying, according to the Russian law, this is allowed. It's not a crime to be frum. It's not written in the Soviet constitution that it's a sin to be religious. There's a sin in the constitution to teach too many people religion, whatever but there were rules. And the Rebbe's whole position in that talk, and the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke the same way, is that it's not against the law, and the Russian government has to honor its own laws. And at the end of the Sikha, the Rebbe said that if there is an agent of the Russian state who stops children from learning Torah within the limits that the government set, he's violated the Russian law, he's a criminal, and he should be prosecuted. That was what the Rebbe spoke in front of 770, outside. Now you can get the Rebbe talking in Russian with English subtitles. But all the big words, the criminalia, all the English words, the big words are all international words. You can recognize the words that Rebbe uses. But the Rebbe Pashat, I guess you could say he attacked the Russian government. He didn't say, why are you against religion? He said, just enforce your laws. It went for a long time. Russians who were at that parade were walking on water. It was like when the Rebbe taught that is Bermuda, the French were walking on water. It was such, it meant so much to them. The Rebbe went on for a very long time. I don't know how long the Sikha was, but it was not 5 minutes, where he basically said it's completely legal in Russia to practice Yiddishkeit. It's completely legal in Russia to teach Torah to your children. It's even legal in Russia within certain limitations to teach your neighbor's children. And someone in Russia who stops doing that is violating the Russian law, and he should be prosecuted according to the full extent of the Russian law. That's what the Rebbe said. And you asked me a very important question. When the Rebbe spoke that Sikha, I was only 14. I'm a dumb 57-year-old, and I was a dumb 14-year-old. People who understood the Rebbe and understood how particular the Rebbe was were very surprised. It was a chutzpah. It was an affront. It was a direct insult to the Soviet leaders, which was something that Rebbe was very careful not to do. Very careful not to do. The Rebbe's whole shita was, don't start up with them, and you can get away with anything, just do it quietly. The minute you start up with them, this is the nature of a Russian, he has to fight back. That's why the Rebbe was against the protests. The Rebbe was against anything to embarrass Russia publicly, like embarrassing Putin publicly. It's the same principle. If you want to get to Putin, don't call him a criminal. Because it's the nature of the Russian. You do things quietly. And the Rebbe was, so for the Rebbe to do this publicly, you asked why he didn't do it a year earlier. The correct answer to that question, without knowing, besides the fact that Rebbe told me I shouldn't tell you, like I said to you before, is it was very bold. It was ahead of its time. In 5 years later, the Sikha began to make sense. 10 years later, the Rebbe saw that it was coming apart. We didn't see that. The Rebbe saw that it was coming apart, and the Rebbe felt now was time to push. So he pushed, you understand? This was Tafshin Mem. Now, the next parades were Mem Gimbal. I was in Yeshiva, Tafshin Gimbal Dald. I remember the Altair's floats, that's what I remember. There were parades, the Rebbe came out, the Rebbe spoke to the children. What specifically happened, I cannot identify particular things that happened. Tafshin Mem Zai in 1987, I was again not here, I was on Shlichus. There was again a parade. The Rebbe came and spoke to the children. And again, I don't have any particular memories with which to share with you. There's a story, this is Pashat Lashon Hara. They invited Mordechai ben David to speak at one of the parades. It probably was Mem Dalet. Maybe it's Mem Gimel. So they invited Mordechai ben David to sing at the parade. So the Rebbe wrote a note that he shouldn't sing before the Rebbe comes out, he should sing when the Rebbe is there. So the Rebbe came out and the Mordechai ben David started to sing. And the Rebbe started looking at the little pamphlet that they had, that they gave out for the parade, you know. And after 2 songs, the Rebbe turns to Yankel Hecht and he says, if you're making a concert, I don't need to be here for that part. I go back in and come out when the concert's over. The Rebbe didn't want Mordechai ben David to sing as an entertainer. This is my interpretation. The Rebbe wanted him to sing with all of the kids. And I got to push it to sing like he sings at a concert. It didn't work out. The Rebbe was unhappy. That's why the year later, the Yankel Hecht says to the Rebbe, is the Rebbe zufrieden? Is the Rebbe happy? The Rebbe said, I'm very happy. Because the year before, the Rebbe had been disappointed. Now, Tavshin Memches, they made a parade. Now, the reason they're making a parade this year is because them was Hakel and this year is Hakel. I may sound like an apocryphal, but they made that parade for the Rebbe. The Rebbe was an oval, and the Rebbe was an oval. The Rebbe was really an oval. In other words, the Rebbe didn't just lose his wife. The Rebbe was Tzbrachim. And they decided to make a parade, the Schus, the Rebbetzin, and they really hoped that Rebbe would come. And they made all over the world parades. It was the middle of the week. I think it was a Thursday. And the Rebbe didn't come out. The Rebbe was not going to come out. And I think the reason the Rebbe didn't come out, even though Al-Pi Halacha, when you lose a wife, you're only an Rebbe for 30 days, the Rebbe was going to keep Avelis for a year, and he wasn't going to participate. And Yankel Hech started to threaten the Rebbe. The Rebbe's not coming out when I'm making the parade. If the Rebbe doesn't come, the parade is meaningless. They were mefarsim now, the minus, the answers from the Rebbe. They're very interesting. They're cute almost. Where the Rebbe writes to Yankel Hech, do you want to cancel the parade? Okay, go ahead, but do me a favor. Go to Miron and let the Rashbi know that you're canceling his day for whatever personal reasons you have. Like, don't look at me. It's not about me. It's about the B'Shem B'Yochai. You want to mess with the B'Shem B'Yochai? Go ahead, mess with him. But you tell him. I'm not going to tell him. You tell him yourself. Anyway, but at some point he basically blackmailed the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote, Ki yadua gzeh kvar kama pa'omim she'ein nichnoim leterror. The Rebbe wrote in Hebrew that you don't give in to terrorists, basically, to threats. He threatened the Rebbe that he's not going to come. The Rebbe did not come to that parade, but there was a parade. And the last parade before the stroke, the most recent parade before the stroke, was Tafshin Nun. What I remember most with that parade is that as soon as the Rebbe left, it started to pour like you never saw, cats and dogs. And the Rebbe minted a coin. I'm sure you've heard that story. Rabbi Chris tells that story. He asked for a silver coin to be minted special. It cost a lot of money. A silver dollar then probably costed $7. Today it probably costs $25. I don't know. And the Rebbe gave out 10,000 of them. It was an awful lot of money. And the hardest part was getting it minted in a very, very short time. Rabbi Krinsky tells the story how the Rebbe asked him a few days before to make coins, and it was physically not possible. And he told the Rebbe there's not enough time, and the Rebbe wrote back, it's my fault. I should have thought about it before. And Rabbi Krinsky felt very bad that the Rebbe should use those words, so they made it happen. There was a few miracles. Bottom line is the Rebbe minted a coin. The Rebbe had given out silver dollars Chanukah. For Chanukah, they would give us $5 bill once. It was $7. The Rebbe gave away so much money. And by the way, for us, it's money that we keep. For the Rebbe, it was real money. I have a silver dollar from the Rebbe. I have $5 the Rebbe gave Shir Geld. A silver dollar. But by that parade, the Rebbe gave a silver dollar with a unique mint.
And it's legal tender?
I don't know if it's legal tender, but it's worth the weight of the silver is worth money. On one side, it has a picture of 770, and the other side, there was a mishap because I remember Rabbi Hecht announcing that the tankisten are going to give out the coins, and I remember the Rebbe's face. I sort of understood that the Rebbe would have given everybody himself the coins. Paltiel, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong, but we got it through the tankisten. But that was the most recent parade. After the parade was over, they decided to pour. It poured. But that was the most recent parade that I remember from the Rebbe. This is a little bit of some particulars of Lag BaOmer. Now, just to add, the Lag BaOmer parades were a big deal, and they were primarily for the children. But Lag BaOmer was not only for the children, Lag BaOmer was also for the adults. Lag BaOmer was one of the days that not every year, but very, very often was a Fabrengen. And the Fabrengens of Lag BaOmer were memorable. They were big deals. I'm learning now that my Morim of 1975, Tafshan Lamed Hey, it's my learning. That year, as the Rebbe always went to the oil Lag BaOmer, always. That year, the Rebbe came back from the oil, David Mincha, and made a Fabrengen before Maide, before the Shkia. The problem was there was a wedding in Crown Heights that day. And the Rebbe was very sensitive. The Rebbe would not make a Fabreng, if there was a wedding. Moshel Chai Elo, there were certain dates that there was a Shaila, you would ask the Rebbe before if there's going to be a Fabrengen, if you could make a wedding, and if the Rebbe okayed the wedding, there was no Fabrengen. There's the famous story, one time the Rebbe told the couple to make a chasana, and Lapel, the Rebbe made a Fabrengen anyway, and the Rebbe apologized to that couple, and they had their Sheva Barachas. You've seen it in the Gem videos. At the Fabrengen, the Chosan Kala Poshet came from the hall, and they had Sheva Barachas in 770. But the Rebbe was very sensitive. So Fabrengen started very late. And halachically, to start, I never washed. For the Rebbe to eat a Suda so close to his mom Mairev, before Mairev was a Pele, and the Rebbe said in the Fabrengen that there's stories from the early Rebbe, Pashat Lag BaOmer was a day that the Rebbe considered very special, very, very important. There were a lot of Fabrengens with Chassidim, the Maimorim of Lag BaOmer, the Maimer that I'm learning, it's 11 pages long, which is a very long Maimer. There were many occasions where Lag BaOmer, besides for the Lag BaOmer that the Rebbe had with the children, the Lag BaOmer that the Rebbe had with Chassidim was very memorable. There's a lot of important Maimorim. And it's Hilul Rashbi, the Rebbe celebrated Rashbi, that Fabrengen the Rebbe washed. And by the way, this is just a piece of information. If you want to know how to wash for bread, get that video and watch the Rebbe washing. I watched the Rebbe wash in my lifetime. If I said 25 times, it's an understatement. Close to 50 times. Because there were at least 4 Fabrengens a year that Rebbe washed. Rosh Hashanah, Simchas Torah, Pesach and Shavuos. And oftentimes there was a 5th. So if I was there for 5 years, it's 20 times. I was there for 10 years, it's 40 times. I was probably there for 15 years. But you never saw the Rebbe wash. But there's a weekday Fabrengen where the Rebbe washes. And you can get a hold of the video. There's that Fabrengen too, Lag BaOmer Tavshan Lamed Hey. There's also when the Rebbe watched for the children in the sukkah. I don't know, but you see the Rebbe checking his nails. The Rebbe checked his nails. Everything was very quick. And they washed his hands. And we dried his hands. You could learn so much at looking at the Rebbe wash. You want to know how to wash? There's a video of the Rebbe washing. You could watch it. And just do it. Just do what the Rebbe did. You're good. You're in business. But at the end of the Fabrengen, the Rebbe benched and he gave Keshel Bracha. But he did something unusual. Usually with the Rebbe Keshel Bracha, he gave it himself, which took a long time. And for some reason, the Rebbe did not want to give the women. I'm assuming that you don't give women Keshel Bracha, even though in Chumash, the Malachim gave Keshel Bracha to Sarah, but maybe Malachim are different than the people. So the Rebbe said that Keshel Bracha is going to be only for the men, and he's going to do it through the Tankisten. The Rebbe did not give Keshel Bracha to everybody. They took big bottles, they put a little bit of wine from the Rebbe's Becher, they filled them up with wine, and then the Tankisten gave everybody L'chaim. And the women, the Rebbe gave $2. They get Keshel Bracha, they got $2. Anyway, this is as they say, there's so much to tell, and so much that I don't know. But Lag BaOmer was one of the days by the Rebbe which was very special, and it was a big simcha, and it was an opportunity for, this I can tell you, the stories of Lag BaOmer by the Rebbe with miracles, there's no end to them. There's mamish giluyim neiroyim, the stories of the Rebbe Lag BaOmer. Okay, I'm going to let you go.